the city skyline touching the clouds with steel and glass. At its very peak, the towering headquarters of Sterling Global gleamed, a fortress of ambition. Inside, on the highest floor, Miss Albright ruled. Her office was a masterpiece of sharp angles and stark colors, reflecting her own sharp, unyielding nature. She was the CEO, a woman forged in fire, known for her quick decisions and even quicker temper. Her reputation echoed through the silent, plush corridors, brilliant, demanding, and utterly ruthless. Miss Albright sat at her desk, a polished slab of obsidian, overlooking the entire bustling city. Her eyes, sharp as a hawk's, scanned the complex financial reports on her dual monitors. Millions of dollars, careers, and the future of her company rested on her shoulders. Today was no ordinary day. A colossal deal, months in the making, was on the brink. One wrong move, one tiny slip, could shatter everything. The pressure was a physical weight, pressing down on her, sharpening her edges even further. She hated mistakes. She despised weakness. Far below, in the hushed, forgotten corners of the same gleaming building, moved Mr. Evans. He was a man of quiet steps and even quieter words. His uniform, a simple charcoal gray, blended perfectly into the shadows of the late evening. He pushed his cart, a symphony of soft squeaks, through empty offices, collecting discarded dreams and forgotten coffee cups. Mr. Evans was the night janitor. He saw everything, yet was seen by no one. He cleaned up the chaos left behind by the titans of industry, making order out of their daily storms. Mr. Evans had worked at Sterling Global for decades. He knew the building better than Miss Albright knew her own balance sheets. He knew the subtle creak of the 17th floor conference room door, the faint smell of jasmine that always lingered on the 32nd floor, and the hum of the old server room in the basement. He saw the frantic late-night work, the celebratory toasts, and the tearful goodbyes as people were let go. He was a ghost in the machine, a silent witness to the endless drama of corporate life. He moved with a gentle precision, each wipe of his cloth, each sweep of his broom, a small act of quiet dignity. Tonight, Mr. Evans felt a different kind of tension in the air. The usual late-night buzz was gone, replaced by a nervous hush. Even the security guards seemed more watchful, their footsteps heavier. He noticed the lights on in Miss Albright's office, even past midnight. That was unusual. She often stayed late, but not this late. He knew she was a machine, but tonight felt different, charged with an almost painful electricity. He had heard whispers from the few remaining assistants about the Darien deal, a monster transaction that could either launch Sterling Global into the stratosphere or send it crashing down. He continued his rounds, emptying bins, wiping down surfaces. His gaze, though often overlooked, was surprisingly keen. He saw the crumpled drafts of contracts, the stressed-out scrawls on whiteboards, the faint trembling in the hands of the young analyst who was still at his desk at 1 a.m. Mr. Evans understood the language of stress, of pressure. His own life, simple as it was, had taught him its harsh lessons. He carried a small, worn leather-bound book in his pocket, a personal treasure, though no one ever saw him read it. It was his anchor, his quiet strength. Upstairs, Miss Albright slammed her fist softly on her desk. The numbers weren't adding up. A critical piece of data, a valuation of an obscure subsidiary, was missing. She had tasked her team with triple-checking everything. How could something so vital simply vanish? Her perfect plan was unraveling. Her mind raced, a whirlwind of calculations and consequences. The board meeting was tomorrow morning. If she didn't have this, the deal was dead. Her rivals would pounce. Her carefully built empire would crack. She stood up, pacing her expansive office. Her silk blouse felt too tight, her heels too loud against the marble floor. She felt a surge of cold fury. Someone had made a mistake, a big one, and someone would pay for it. She picked up her phone, ready to tear into her last remaining assistant, when a faint, distant hum reached her ears. It was the sound of the cleaning crew, making their final rounds. A small annoyance, a reminder of the unseen gears turning beneath her magnificent kingdom. She barely registered their existence most days. Tonight, however, the timing felt wrong. The hum, the subtle scent of cleaning solution, seemed to invade her pristine, high-stakes world. She needed absolute silence, absolute focus. She walked to her office door, intending to give a sharp order for them to cease their work near her floor. Her hand was on the cold metal knob, her jaw set, a storm brewing in her eyes. She was ready to unleash her frustration, to demand perfection from every corner of her domain, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant. Unbeknownst to her, Mr. Evans was just turning the corner onto her executive floor. He held a small, slightly smudged document in his hand. He had found it earlier, tucked beneath a stack of old magazines in the waiting area, near a discarded coffee cup. It looked important, official, not like the usual trash. He had almost thrown it away, but something about the company logo, crisp and bold, made him pause. His simple sense of duty, his lifetime of putting things right, told him it needed to be returned, not discarded. He did not know what it was, but he knew it held significance. Miss Albright pulled open her office door. Her voice was already forming the sharp, cutting words she was about to deliver. Her face was a mask of furious determination. She saw Mr. Evans, his back to her, methodically polishing a display case, the smudged document clutched loosely in one hand. She saw the humble uniform, the bowed head, the quiet, almost invisible man. Her temper, already boiling, suddenly flared hotter. How dare he interrupt her silent vigil with the mundane sounds of his work? How dare he be so oblivious to the weight of her world? She took a deep breath, ready to strike, ready to assert her absolute authority. She was about to make it clear that in her world, there was no room for error, no tolerance for distraction, and certainly no place for the quietly dignified worker who seemed to exist in a different universe. This was her empire, and she was its undisputed queen. And he, the janitor, was about to learn that even the smallest presence could become a target for her formidable anger, especially when she felt everything slipping from her grasp. Her gaze fixed on him, a cold fire in her eyes. She was poised to deliver a blow that would resonate through his quiet world, utterly unaware of the small, crumpled paper he held, or the extraordinary power of a single word yet to be spoken. The very air seemed to crackle with the unspoken drama about to unfold between the powerful CEO and the unassuming janitor, a confrontation that would challenge everything she thought she knew. Miss Albright stepped into the hallway. The scent of disinfectant, usually faint, now seemed sharp and intrusive. Her eyes narrowed. Mr. Evans continued his work, oblivious. He was wiping down a glass display, his movements practiced and slow. The small document, half hidden in his hand, seemed insignificant to her. All she saw was an interruption. All she felt was the mounting frustration of a deal on the verge of collapse, and a sense of absolute power being undermined by something so trivial. Miss Albright said, "You." Her voice, usually a controlled, precise instrument, now held an edge like a newly sharpened blade. It cut through the quiet hum of the building's ventilation system. Mr. Evans flinched, his hand stilling on the glass. He slowly turned, his eyes, usually soft and distant, now wide with surprise. He had not expected to see her, especially not at this late hour, and certainly not with such an intense, angry look on her face. Mr. Evans said, "Ma'am." His voice was a low rumble, worn smooth by years of quiet. "Miss Albright said, what are you doing here? Don't you know what time it is?" Her words were clipped, each syllable delivered with the force of a hammer blow. "This is the executive floor. I require absolute silence, absolute focus. This cleaning can wait until the morning, or, better yet, until after I've left." Mr. Evans looked down at his cleaning cart, then back at her. A faint flush rose to his cheeks. He wasn't used to being spoken to in such a manner, not directly, not with such overt hostility. He was a man who performed his duties without fuss, without drawing attention. He was the invisible backbone of the building. Mr. Evans said, "I apologize, ma'am. I was just finishing up. I found this. It looked important." He extended the smudged document towards her. His hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the sudden, unexpected spotlight of her fury. Miss Albright barely glanced at the paper. Her eyes were fixed on him, seeing not the document, but the interruption, the perceived insolence. Her mind was still wrestling with the missing data, the collapsing deal. Her frustration needed an outlet, and Mr. Evans, in his simple gray uniform, became the unwitting target. "Miss Albright said, I don't care what you found. Your job is to clean, not to disturb, not to wander around with important-looking papers. You think you're helping? You're a distraction. A nuisance. Do you understand the stakes involved tonight? Do you understand what this company means?" Her voice rose slightly, an unusual display of raw emotion for the usually composed CEO. Mr. Evans lowered his hand, the document still clutched within it. He looked at her, truly looked at her, not as the all-powerful CEO, but as a person under immense strain. He saw the tight lines around her mouth, the shadows under her eyes, the desperate glint of panic beneath the anger. He had seen that look before, on the faces of others whose careers hung by a thread. He felt a pang of something akin to pity, though he would never express it. Mr. Evans said, "I understand, ma'am." His voice was still calm, a quiet pool against her raging storm. "But this document—" Miss Albright cut him off. Her patience snapped. The pressure of the deal, the lack of sleep, the fear of failure, all converged into a single, explosive point. This man, with his quiet insistence, his perceived slowness, became the embodiment of everything going wrong. She saw him as a symbol of inefficiency, of the world's stubborn refusal to bend to her will. Miss Albright said, "No, you don't understand. You don't understand anything. You're a janitor. You clean toilets. You empty trash. You don't make decisions. You don't move markets. You are an expendable part of this machine, and frankly, right now, you're a broken part." Her words hung in the air, sharp and cruel. The silence that followed was deafening, amplifying the sting of her accusation. Mr. Evans stood very still. His gaze, which had been gentle, now held a deep, unreadable sadness. He seemed to shrink, or perhaps it was the world around him that suddenly expanded, making him feel smaller. Mr. Evans said, "Ma'am, I only wanted to." Miss Albright took a step closer, her heels clicking ominously on the polished floor. Her face was flushed with anger, her perfect composure finally shattered. She pointed a finger at him, a gesture of absolute dismissal. She needed control, absolute control, and this quiet man, with his quiet presence, was challenging that. Miss Albright said, "No, you only wanted to interrupt me. You only wanted to draw attention to yourself. I have no time for this. No time for distractions. This company needs people who are sharp, who are vital, who contribute, not people who shuffle around in the shadows, making noise when they shouldn't." She paused, her chest heaving slightly. The words came out, harsh and final, a verdict delivered without appeal. "You're fired." The two words echoed through the sterile hallway. "You're fired." They were a death knell in the corporate world, a sentence that ended careers, shattered lives. Mr. Evans stood frozen, the crumpled document still in his hand. The weight of those words, spoken by the most powerful woman in the company, settled heavily upon him. Decades of service, of quiet loyalty, of unseen work, dismissed in an instant. Miss Albright watched him, expecting a reaction. Tears, anger, pleading, anything. She expected the typical response of someone whose livelihood had just been snatched away. But Mr. Evans just stood there, his face unreadable, his eyes still holding that profound sadness. He slowly, deliberately, opened his hand. The smudged document was revealed fully. It was a single sheet of paper, a printout from a financial report, with the Sterling Global logo at the top. Mr. Evans said, "Then I suppose you won't be needing this." His voice was barely a whisper, yet it carried an unexpected weight. He held the document out to her, his hand steady despite the tremors in his heart. Miss Albright looked at the paper for the first time, truly seeing it. Her eyes, still blazing with anger, scanned the title. Her breath hitched. Her blood ran cold. It was the valuation report, the precise, crucial subsidiary valuation that was missing. The one piece of data that could save her deal, her reputation, her empire. It was not smudged or crumpled beyond recognition. It was perfectly legible, folded once. Miss Albright said, What is this?" Her voice was suddenly weak, a stark contrast to her previous fury. The color drained from her face, leaving it pale and drawn. The anger melted away, replaced by a dawning, horrifying realization. Mr. Evans said, "It's the Darien subsidiary valuation, ma'am. I found it near the 22nd floor copier earlier. Someone must have forgotten it." His words were, still soft, but now they carried the quiet power of an undeniable truth. He held the paper out, offering it like a peace treaty. Miss Albright stared at the document, then at Mr. Evans. The silence returned, thick and suffocating. The reality of the situation crashed over her like a tidal wave. She had fired the very man who held the key to her salvation. She had screamed at him, humiliated him, dismissed his decades of service, all for a paper he was trying to return. Her empire, her deal, her entire future, had been hanging by a thread, and this quiet, unassuming man, whom she had just cast aside, had been holding that thread. Miss Albright reached out a trembling hand and took the paper. Her fingers brushed his, and she felt the roughness of his skin, the calloused tips of fingers that had cleaned and maintained her world for so long. She unfolded the document. The numbers were all there, clear and precise. The missing piece, the vital, impossible to find information. Miss Albright said, This is it. This is the report. Her voice was a mere whisper, laced with disbelief and a growing horror. She looked up at Mr. Evans, her eyes wide, no longer filled with anger, but with a dawning shame and an overwhelming sense of regret. The power dynamics of the moment had utterly flipped. She, the formidable CEO, was now utterly vulnerable, exposed by her own arrogance. He, the humble janitor, stood before her, not as a victim, but as a silent, dignified presence who had just demonstrated an unspoken power far greater than her own. His one word, then, followed by his simple action, had ripped away her certainty and exposed her deepest error. The regret was a bitter taste in her mouth, a burning sensation behind her eyes. Everything she believed about control, about contribution, about worth, was suddenly in question, shattered by the quiet honesty of a man she had so cruelly dismissed. She realized, with a sickening lurch, that she had made the biggest mistake of her career, and it wasn't about numbers or deals. It was about humanity. And the consequences, she knew, would be profound. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Between them, Miss Albright held the report, her eyes still fixed on Mr. Evans. The vibrant colors of her office, the polished gleam of the hallway, seemed to lose their brilliance, fading into a dull, gray backdrop for her internal turmoil. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of shame and dawning realization. She, the untouchable CEO, felt a cold sweat prickle her skin. Mr. Evans, in turn, watched her. His expression remained unreadable, a quiet dignity cloaking him. He was not gloating, not angry, not even triumphant. He simply stood there, a silent mirror reflecting her own harsh words back at her. The moment was agonizing, a slow-motion unraveling of her carefully constructed world. Miss Albright said, Mr. Evans, I don't know what to say. Her voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. The words felt alien on her tongue, an apology she was unaccustomed to offering. Mr. Evans said, There's no need, ma'am. He sounded tired, but not defeated. His gaze was steady, unwavering. Miss Albright's mind raced back through the last few minutes. Her rage, her dismissal, her utter contempt. She had called him a distraction, a nuisance, expendable. She had fired him for doing precisely what she desperately needed done. The irony was a bitter, sickening taste in her mouth. She had been so caught up in her own stress, her own perceived superiority, that she had blinded herself to the quiet competency right in front of her. Miss Albright said, No, there is a need. I spoke to you abominably. I was under immense pressure, but that is no excuse for my behavior. You were trying to help, and I. She trailed off, unable to complete the sentence. The words stuck in her throat, choked by the sheer weight of her mistake. Mr. Evans said, It happens, ma'am. Stress can make people say things they don't mean. He offered a small, almost imperceptible nod. His understanding, his lack of judgment, was another quiet blow to her pride. He was forgiving her before she even fully articulated her regret. Miss Albright felt a fresh wave of shame wash over her. His simple compassion made her feel even smaller. She, who wielded power like a weapon, was suddenly disarmed by an act of pure, unadorned kindness from the man she had just insulted. Miss Albright said, But I did mean it. In the heat of the moment, I meant every cruel word. And I fired you. For doing your job, for being diligent, for being honorable, for saving my entire deal. She looked down at the report in her hand, then back up at him. This report, it means everything. The Darien deal hinges on this. Without it, Sterling Global faces a massive setback. Years of work, millions of dollars, all gone. You just saved it, Mr. Evans. You saved my company. Mr. Evans said, I just found a piece of paper, ma'am. It was my duty to return it. His humility was striking, a stark contrast to her own towering ego. Miss Albright shook her head slowly. The carefully constructed facade of the ruthless CEO began to crumble. She saw herself through his eyes, perhaps for the first time, a woman consumed by ambition, blinded by power, who had lost touch with the very humanity she claimed to lead. Miss Albright said, No, Mr. Evans. It was more than that. It was diligence. It was integrity. It was knowing the value of something, even when you didn't understand its full purpose. Something I clearly forgot in my panic. She paused, taking a shaky breath. I was wrong. deeply, fundamentally wrong about you. And about myself. The raw honesty in her voice was startling, even to herself. It was a confession, a genuine moment of vulnerability. She felt a lightness, despite the crushing weight of her regret. It was the feeling of a mask slipping, of true emotion finally breaking through. Miss Albright said, "Mr. Evans, I need to retract what I said. I need to apologize, properly, and I need to ask you to reconsider. To please, stay. Your job is safe. More than safe. I was an absolute fool." Mr. Evans looked away for a moment, his gaze drifting towards the city lights twinkling outside the massive windows. He had seen many people come and go from Sterling Global. He had witnessed countless displays of ego, ambition, and occasional flashes of genuine decency. This, however, was something new. A CEO, Miss Albright no less, admitting fault, genuinely asking for forgiveness. Mr. Evans said, "Ma'am, with all due respect, I've heard apologies before." His voice was gentle, but firm. "I've seen people in your position take back words only to repeat them later. It's the nature of this place." Miss Albright flinched. His words, delivered without malice, still struck her with the force of a truth she couldn't deny. She had, in fact, witnessed similar patterns herself. Apologies often given out of convenience, not genuine change. Miss Albright said, "I understand why you'd think that, and I know words aren't enough. My actions, tonight, have been unforgivable. But I promise you, Mr. Evans, this is different. I'm not just asking you to stay because I need this report. I'm asking you to stay because I realized how profoundly I've misjudged you and how wrong my entire approach has been." She looked at him, her eyes pleading. "Please, give me a chance to prove it, to you and to myself." Mr. Evans remained silent for a long moment. He looked at the document in her hand, then back to her face. He saw not just the CEO, but a human being laid bare, stripped of her usual defenses. He saw the struggle in her eyes, the genuine distress. He had a deep understanding of human frailty, born from a life lived on the periphery, observing. Mr. Evans said, "Ma'am, my family has worked for this company for 3 generations. My grandfather started here as a cleaner, then my father, and now me. Sterling Global has been our world. It's provided for us, given us a life." He paused, a wistful look on his face. "I don't leave easily." Miss Albright felt a glimmer of hope. "So you'll stay?" she asked, her voice barely daring to breathe the words. Mr. Evans said, "I haven't said I'll stay. I said I don't leave easily." He let that hang in the air, a quiet challenge. "But being fired is a pretty good reason to leave. Wouldn't you agree, Miss?" Albright swallowed hard. He wasn't making it easy, and she knew he shouldn't. She had earned his distrust. Miss Albright said, "You are absolutely right. And I have no right to ask you to stay. But I am asking, desperately. I will do whatever it takes to make this right, Mr. Evans. Whatever you need. A formal apology in front of the entire company. A raise, a promotion, anything." She was practically begging, a desperate turn for the woman who never begged. Mr. Evans looked at her, a faint smile touching the corners of his mouth. It wasn't a smile of amusement, but of understanding. "A promotion, ma'am? To what? Head of janitorial services?" "I already do that effectively," Miss Albright said. "No, not that. Something different. Something that truly recognizes your value, your integrity, your wisdom." She was scrambling, her mind trying to process how to mend a rift she had so carelessly created. She needed to do more than just keep him. She needed to restore her own sense of what was right. Mr. Evans said, "My value isn't measured by a title, ma'am, or by money. It's measured by how I do my work, how I live my life. And tonight, I did my work. I tried to do what was right." Miss Albright felt a profound respect bloom within her, eclipsing her shame. This man, so often overlooked, possessed a moral compass sharper than any she had ever encountered in the cutthroat world of corporate finance. He was an anchor of quiet strength, a stark contrast to her own storm-tossed existence. Miss Albright said, "You are right. You are absolutely right, Mr. Evans. And that's exactly what I've been missing. I've been so focused on results, on numbers, on power, that I've forgotten the people. The quiet strength, the essential decency that actually holds a company together." She looked around the opulent hallway, suddenly seeing it with new eyes. Not as a symbol of her achievement, but as a monument to her blindness. Miss Albright said, "I need to go prepare for this board meeting. But before I do, I need to know something. Will you, Mr. Evans, accept my apology? And will you, please, consider not leaving Sterling Global? I truly believe that this company, and perhaps I myself, need your quiet presence more than ever. Mr. Evans looked at her, a long, assessing look. He saw the genuine remorse, the subtle shift in her posture, the vulnerability in her eyes. It was a transformation, however small, that he hadn't expected. He had seen enough to know it was real. He also knew the profound ripple effect that such a dismissal would have on his family, on his quiet life. Mr. Evans said, I accept your apology, ma'am. It takes a strong person to admit they were wrong, especially when they're in your position. He paused, then added, as for staying, I'll think about it. But I'll need to hear it from you. First thing in the morning, when the pressure is off. Not just for me, but for what it means. Miss Albright nodded, a wave of relief washing over her. It wasn't a definitive yes, but it wasn't a no. It was a lifeline. Understood, Mr. Evans. First thing in the morning. And thank you. Thank you for everything. She clutched the report, her hand still trembling slightly. She turned and walked back into her office, a different woman than the one who had stormed out just minutes before. The weight of the Darien deal was still immense, but now it was compounded by a new, more profound burden, the weight of her conscience and the quiet dignity of Mr. Evans. Mr. Evans watched her go, then slowly turned back to his cleaning cart. He picked up his cloth and, with a renewed sense of purpose, began to polish the glass display case once more. The city lights still twinkled outside, but the air inside Sterling Global felt subtly changed, charged with a new, unspoken understanding. The night was far from over, both for the high-flying CEO and the quiet janitor. The repercussions of their dramatic encounter, however, were just beginning to unfold. He knew that the morning would bring its own set of challenges, and that Miss Albright's promise would be truly tested once the immediate crisis had passed. He had seen enough to be cautiously optimistic, but also enough to know that true change takes time and consistent effort. He finished polishing the display case, then quietly pushed his cart further down the executive hallway, continuing his rounds, a sentinel of integrity in the heart of the corporate labyrinth. The world, for a moment, seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what the new day would bring for Sterling Global and for its two most unlikely protagonists. The first rays of dawn painted the sky in hues of soft pink and orange, casting a warm glow over the cold steel of Sterling Global. Inside Miss Albright's office, the glow was muted by thick blinds, but the energy was electric. She had worked through the night, fueled by strong coffee and a renewed, almost desperate, focus. The missing report had been integrated, the numbers meticulously checked, and the presentation polished to a flawless sheen. She looked at her reflection in the dark glass of her monitors. Her eyes were bloodshot, but there was a new resolve in their depth, a quiet determination that went beyond just the Darien deal. She had faced down a crisis of business, but more importantly, a crisis of character. The memory of Mr. Evans's calm, dignified face, his steady gaze, haunted her. His "I'll think about it" echoed in her mind. It was a challenge, a test of her sincerity. The board meeting was a blur of power suits, sharp questions, and projected graphs. Miss Albright, usually a bastion of cool confidence, found herself speaking with a slightly different timbre. There was still the undeniable brilliance, the mastery of finance, but now, a subtle humility underpinned her words. She presented the Darien deal, complete with the crucial valuation report, with an unprecedented clarity and precision. The board members, usually reserved, leaned forward, captivated. At the end of her presentation, a wave of applause rippled through the room. The Darien deal was approved. It was a resounding success, a triumph that would solidify Sterling Global's position as a market leader for years to come. Relief, immense and profound, washed over Miss Albright. But amidst the celebration, a different thought pressed in. The promise she had made. She quickly excused herself from the congratulatory handshakes and backpats. Her assistant, a young man named Alex, hurried after her. Alex said, Miss Albright, that was incredible. You pulled it off. Everyone is thrilled. Mr. Caldwell, from the board, just said you're a genius. Miss Albright said, Thank you, Alex, but I need you to do something for me, immediately. Her voice was still firm, but held an unusual softness. Find Mr. Evans, the head of our night cleaning crew. Ask him to come to my office. Immediately. Alex blinked, surprised. He was used to her summoning department heads or legal counsel, not the night janitor. especially not right after closing the biggest deal of the year. He had only seen Mr. Evans a handful of times, a quiet figure in the background. Alex said, "Mr. Evans? The janitor? Is everything all right, ma'am?" His tone held a hint of concern. "Miss," Albright said, "everything is fine, Alex. More than fine. Just find him. Tell him it's important." She walked briskly towards her office, her mind already preparing for the difficult, yet necessary, conversation. Meanwhile, Mr. Evans was in the staff break room, quietly eating a sandwich. He had finished his shift, cleaned the boardroom where Miss Albright was now celebrating, and was about to head home. He still felt the lingering sting of Miss Albright's words from the night before, though her later apology had softened the blow. He wondered if she would remember her promise, if the victory of the deal would erase the memory of her regret. He knew how easily such things could be forgotten in the whirlwind of corporate success. Alex found him there, looking somewhat awkward as he approached the usually invisible staff. Alex said, "Mr. Evans? Miss Albright needs to see you. In her office. Right away." Mr. Evans looked up, surprised. He had expected her to forget, or to send a terse email through HR. Not a personal summons, and certainly not so soon. He wiped his hands on a napkin and stood up slowly. Mr. Evans said, "She does? Is there a problem?" Alex said, "No, not that I know of. She just said it was important. She seems different today." Mr. Evans nodded. Different indeed. He followed Alex, his quiet steps echoing in the now bustling daytime hallways. The building felt alive, energized by the successful deal. He saw smiling faces, heard excited chatter. He was still the silent observer, but today, he was also the man summoned to the CEO's inner sanctum. When he arrived at Miss Albright's office, the door was open. She stood by the window, looking out at the city, the Darien report lying conspicuously on her desk. She turned as he entered, her expression composed, but with a new depth in her eyes. "Miss," Albright said, "Mr. Evans, thank you for coming. Please, sit." She gestured to a plush leather armchair, a seat usually reserved for high-powered executives or influential clients. Mr. Evans hesitated for a moment, then sat, his gray uniform looking stark against the luxurious upholstery. He felt a flicker of nervous energy. He was out of his element, in the glaring light of Pay's day, face-to-face with the woman who had fired him just hours ago. Miss Albright said, "The Darien deal was a success, Mr. Evans. A huge success. Thanks to you." She picked up the report, holding it up slightly. "This was the missing link. You found it, and you tried to return it, even in the face of my unbelievable rudeness." Mr. Evans said, "I'm glad it helped, ma'am." Miss Albright said, "It didn't just help. It saved us. And I want to reiterate my apology, Mr. Evans. This time, with a clear head, and with the full knowledge of how much you truly contributed. I was arrogant, I was blind, and I treated you with utter disrespect. I am truly, deeply sorry." Her words were sincere, heartfelt, leaving no room for doubt. Mr. Evans looked at her, truly seeing the shift. The hard edges of her CEO persona had softened, replaced by a raw honesty. He saw a woman who had been humbled, who was genuinely seeking to make amends. Mr. Evans said, "I accept your apology, ma'am." Miss Albright felt a profound relief wash over her. It was a step, a crucial one. Miss Albright said, "Good. Now, about your employment." She took a deep breath. "Last night, I told you that you were fired. Those words were wrong. They were unjust. And I formally retract them. You are not fired, Mr. Evans. You are very much a part of Sterling Global. A valued part." Mr. Evans said, "Thank you, ma'am." Miss Albright said, "But that's not enough, is it? Just taking back words. Last night, you mentioned something about what my word would mean in the morning, when the pressure was off." She leaned forward, her elbows on her desk. "What do you need, Mr. Evans? What can I do to truly make this right? Not just for you, but for what it represents." Mr. Evans considered her question. He could ask for a large sum of money, a significant promotion, even an executive position, knowing she would likely grant it in her current state of remorse. But that wasn't his way. His needs were simple, his dignity paramount. Mr. Evans said, "Ma'am, what I need is for people like me to be seen, to be respected. Not just the people in the corner offices, but everyone who makes this building run. The cleaners, the security guards, the cafeteria staff. We are all part of Sterling Global. We all contribute." Miss Albright listened, truly listening. His words resonated with a truth she had forgotten, a truth that had been lost in her ascent to the top. She had built a kingdom of steel and glass, but had neglected the human foundations upon which it stood. Miss Albright said, "You are absolutely right, and I have been blind to that. I've focused so much on the visible gears of the machine that I've forgotten the invisible hands that keep it clean, safe, and fed. That ends today." She paused, a new idea forming in her mind, bold and unexpected. "Mr. Evans, I want to create a new position, a direct liaison to my office, specifically for what I'm going to call operational support staff. Someone who reports directly to me, ensuring their voices are heard, their needs are met, and their contributions are recognized at the highest level of this company." Mr. Evans raised an eyebrow, a rare display of surprise. "A liaison?" Miss Albright said. "Yes. Someone who understands the daily realities of running this building from the ground up. Someone with integrity, wisdom, and a clear understanding of what it means to be part of the backbone of Sterling Global. Someone who can help me bridge the gap between the executive floor and the rest of the company. Someone who can remind me, and the rest of the leadership, of what truly matters." She looked at him, her gaze unwavering. "And I want you, Mr. Evans, to be that person." Mr. Evans was speechless. The silence stretched again, but this time it was filled with awe and the weight of an extraordinary offer. From being fired to being offered a direct line to the CEO, a position designed to champion the very people he represented. It was a monumental shift, a recognition of his inherent worth beyond his cleaning uniform. "Mr. Evans said, "Ma'am, I'm just a janitor. I don't have a business degree. I don't know about quarterly reports or market trends." Miss Albright said, "You have something far more valuable, Mr. Evans. You have decades of experience, intimate knowledge of this company, and a moral compass that, frankly, puts mine to shame. You understand people. You understand what it means to serve, to contribute, to be overlooked. Those are precisely the qualities I need to bring to the executive floor. I can teach you the business terms. I can't teach integrity or wisdom." She stood up, walking around her desk to stand directly in front of him. She extended her hand. Miss Albright said, "So, Mr. Evans, what do you say? Will you help me bridge that gap? Will you help me make Sterling Global a company that truly values all of its people?" Mr. Evans looked at her outstretched hand, then into her eyes. He saw the earnestness, the genuine desire for change. He thought of his grandfather, his father, and their quiet dedication. He thought of all the unseen work, the unheard voices. This wasn't just about him. It was about them. Mr. Evans said, "I'll do it, ma'am. On one condition." Miss Albright said, "Name it." Mr. Evans said, "I keep my uniform. At least for a while. It reminds me where I came from. And it reminds you, too, ma'am, of what you learned tonight." Miss Albright smiled, a genuine, warm smile that transformed her face. It was the first time Mr. Evans had ever seen her truly smile. Miss Albright said, "Deal, Mr. Evans. Deal." She shook his hand firmly, a silent pact forged between two unlikely allies. The unexpected agreement hung in the air, a testament to a night of crisis that had become a catalyst for profound change. Mr. Evans, the quiet janitor, was no longer just a cleaner. He was now a bridge builder, an advocate, an unexpected voice of conscience at the highest levels of Sterling Global. And Miss Albright, the ruthless CEO, had found not just a crucial report, but a vital piece of her own lost humanity, all because of one man's quiet dignity and one unforgettable word. The gears of Sterling Global would continue to turn, but now, a new, more humane rhythm had begun to beat within its walls. The city outside still gleamed, but now, it seemed to pulse with a different kind of promise, a promise of a future where true value was recognized not just in numbers, but in every quiet contribution. The transformation within Sterling Global didn't happen overnight, but it began with that handshake. News of the successful Darien deal spread like wildfire, cementing Miss Albright's reputation as a visionary leader. But behind the scenes, another, more profound story began to unfold. Mr. Evans, still in his charcoal gray uniform, now sat at a small, well-appointed desk just outside Miss Albright's office. His title was Director of Operational Well-Being, a name carefully chosen by Miss Albright to reflect the true spirit of his new role. He still performed some of his cleaning duties, mainly because he enjoyed the rhythm of the work, and because, as he put it, "It keeps me grounded, ma'am." His presence, once invisible, was now a quiet, powerful statement. At first, some executives were confused, even dismissive. A janitor in a leadership role? It was unheard of. But Miss Albright made it clear, in no uncertain terms, that Mr. Evans was her direct report, and his insights were to be valued above all else when it came to the well-being and efficiency of the operational staff. She invited him to executive meetings, not to discuss financials, but to offer perspectives on how decisions impacted the people on the ground. During one early meeting, a new policy on staggered work hours was being discussed, designed to save on electricity costs. Miss Albright was presenting the data, showing impressive potential savings. Mr. Evans, quietly, sitting at the table, raised his hand. Mr. Evans said, "Ma'am, with all due respect, while these numbers look good on paper, have we considered the security team, who would have to cover an even longer, spread-out shift with fewer people? Or the extra burden on the cafeteria staff, who would need to prepare meals over a much longer period, reducing their family time?" The room fell silent. Miss Albright looked at him, then at the stunned faces of her executives. She realized, with a jolt, that she had been so focused on the cost-saving metrics that she had completely overlooked the human cost. Miss Albright said, "Mr. Evans makes an excellent point. We need to rethink this. Any policy we implement must consider the entire ecosystem of our company, not just the bottom line." This was just one of many such interventions. Mr. Evans, with his calm demeanor and deep understanding of the building's inner workings, began to highlight critical issues that had long been ignored. He advocated for better lighting in the stairwells for the night shift, for improved ergonomic equipment for the data entry team, for clearer communication channels between departments. He became the voice of the voiceless, bringing their concerns directly to the top. Miss Albright, in turn, became his champion. She defended his insights, backed his suggestions, and made sure his initiatives were implemented. Her interactions with her staff began to change. She was still demanding, still brilliant, but now there was a new layer of empathy, a willingness to listen, to truly understand. The harsh edges of her personality began to soften, replaced by a more nuanced, thoughtful approach to leadership. One afternoon, Miss Albright walked through the bustling lobby, a rarity for her. She saw Mr. Evans, in his uniform, chatting easily with a young security guard. He pointed to a small stain on the marble floor near a potted plant, and the guard chuckled, nodding, as if sharing an inside joke about a relay, particularly messy delivery driver. They were a team, connected by the unseen threads of daily operation. Miss Albright approached them. Miss Albright said, "Mr. Evans, how are things?" Mr. Evans smiled. Mr. Evans said, "Excellent, ma'am. Just discussing the latest coffee spill saga on the 14th floor with Robert here." Robert, the security guard, nodded enthusiastically. Robert said, "Mr. Evans knows everything, ma'am. He's always got our backs." Miss Albright felt a warmth spread through her. This was the change she had hoped for, the community she had unwittingly neglected. Miss Albright said, "Indeed, he does, and I'm learning from him every day." She looked at Mr. Evans. "I owe you a great deal, Mr. Evans. More than just my deal. You reminded me of what it means to be a leader and what it means to be human." Mr. Evans said, "We all learn, ma'am. The important thing is to keep our eyes open." The impact of Mr. Evans's new role rippled beyond Sterling Global. Other companies, hearing whispers of Miss Albright's unusual, operational well-being initiative, began to inquire, some skeptically, others with genuine curiosity. Miss Albright, once fiercely private, started speaking at industry conferences, not just about financial strategy, but about the importance of recognizing the unseen workforce, about the power of quiet dignity, and about the transformative potential of humility. She shared her own story, sometimes with a blush, about the night she almost lost everything and how a janitor's one word changed her entire perspective. Her newfound approach earned her both respect and criticism. Some still saw it as a weakness, a distraction from pure profit. But many others, especially younger employees and those in leadership positions grappling with employee morale, found her story inspiring. Sterling Global saw a noticeable decrease in staff turnover among its support services, an increase in overall employee satisfaction, and even a subtle, yet perceptible, boost in productivity across all levels. The company became known not just for its financial prowess, but for its ethical leadership and its commitment to all its people. Years passed. Miss Albright grew older, her hair silvering at the temples. Mr. Evans continued in his role, a wise, steady presence at her side. His uniform eventually gave way to well-tailored business casual, but he still kept a clean, pressed charcoal shirt and trousers in his office, a quiet reminder of his origins and the lesson that had forged his new path. He had become a mentor, a confidant, a true partner in building a better company. One day, Miss Albright announced her retirement. She stood before the entire company, a sea of faces stretching from the grand lobby to the upper floors, watching via internal monitors. She spoke of Sterling Global's achievements, its future, and then she spoke of Mr. Evans. Miss Albright said, "Many years ago, I stood on the precipice of losing everything. Not just a deal, but my own sense of who I was as a leader. In that moment of crisis, a quiet man, working in the shadows, brought me back from the brink. He taught me that true value isn't always found in quarterly reports or market capitalization. It's found in integrity, in diligence, in the quiet contributions of every single person who walks through these doors." She paused, her eyes sweeping over the crowd, finally resting on Mr. Evans, who stood near the back, a humble smile on his face. Miss Albright said, "Mr. Evans, you taught me that the most powerful word isn't fired, but humanity. You showed me that respect, empathy, and recognizing the worth of every individual are the true cornerstones of any lasting success. You saved this company, not just with a report, but with your character. And for that, I will be eternally grateful." A ripple of applause, then a standing ovation, erupted, not just for Miss Albright, but for Mr. Evans, the janitor who had risen to become the conscience of Sterling Global. It was a testament to how one dramatic encounter, one moment of profound humility, could reshape an entire organization, proving that true leadership often emerges from the most unexpected places. This story, like so many others, reminds us that the most valuable lessons often come from the most unexpected teachers. It's a tale of how arrogance can blind us, and how a single act of quiet dignity can illuminate the path to true wisdom. It's about recognizing that every individual, no matter their role, holds a piece of the puzzle, a vital contribution to the greater whole. What do you think of Miss Albright's transformation? Have you ever had an experience where someone you initially dismissed ended up teaching you a profound lesson? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. We love hearing about your unique perspectives and how these themes resonate in your own lives. If this story touched you, if it made you think, please give this video a like. It truly helps our channel reach more people who might need to hear this message. Don't forget to share it with friends, family, or colleagues who might appreciate a reminder about the power of empathy and respect in leadership. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you won't miss our next story of hidden heroes and unexpected wisdom. Your support helps us continue to create content that aims to inspire, challenge, and connect us all. Thank you for watching, and remember, look closely, for greatness often hides in plain sight.